Joining me now is Jonathan Franks, spokesman and strategist for the Bring Our Families Home campaign. He also worked on the case to free U.S. Marine Trevor Reed from Russian custody back in 2022. Welcome to you, Jonathan. I'm curious your reaction to this multifaceted deal. How challenging do you think it was to pull this off? And were you surprised by its enormous scope?
Well, thanks for having me, Alex. And yes, I was shocked by its enormous scope. And quite frankly, I'm in awe of what the administration pulled off. This is, I heard the other day, this is the largest prisoner swap since 1985 when I was 4 years old. So it was certainly a historic day. And as I think Jake Sullivan said on Thursday, it was a really, really good day.
Can you talk about what getting back to normal routines and the lives that they were taken from will look like now? We do know they started the Brooke Army Medical Center. It does have a focused program and has treated other detainees. That includes Brittany Griner and Travis King. But how difficult of a process is this, and what are the biggest hurdles?
Well, I mean, you have to remember that these folks were, while they were in prison, they were told when to sleep, when to eat, when to go to the bathroom. And, now that they've been released, all of a sudden, there's a flurry of choices that have to be made at all times, as Vladimir kind of alluded to in terms of walking to an airport. And they're not used to that. They're not used to having to make a variety of decisions, that kind of go into free human life. So it does take a second to kind of acclimate, and folks are often sort of dazed, and it takes just a minute to get back into a place where you can exercise your free will.
What about long term? What's the biggest hurdle, you think?
I think long term is the biggest hurdle is whether they got the help at the outset that they needed, right, in order to be successful long term. And that's part of the sort of the genius of taking them to San Antonio and having them go through this program. It used to just be for military folks. They've retooled it for civilians, and I think it's been hugely helpful. I've had several clients go through it, and I'll put it this way: I've never had a client fail after going to that program.
That's good to hear. So the Russians released in exchange, including a hitman, a hacker, a man who committed cyber fraud, a couple who spied for Russia while posing as Argentinians. What can break the cycle of innocent Americans being detained in Russia on false charges and then returned only when actual criminals are returned?
Unfortunately, this sort of cycle of what I would call state-sponsored kidnap for ransom has gone on, since the dawn of time. So it is a very challenging phenomenon to stop. I think there absolutely needs to be a focus, and a focus by people much smarter than I, on how we're going to impose consequences on these hostage-taking countries. Obviously, once an American gets, as the president alluded to, once an American gets caught, we've got to bring them home. And, separate in the conversation about prevention and imposing costs is a separate one.
Well, speaking of bringing some home, there are still several Americans being detained in Russia, and that includes a client of yours, that being Air Force veteran Travis Leak. What is his story and what's happening now?
Travis Leak had been living successfully in Russia for some time. He was set up in a drug bust that seems to have been largely engineered so that the arresting police officers could have an American to hand over to the FSB. Which is good for their careers. In fact, the complaining witness in Travis's case, the only witness against him, recanted on the stand and was charged with and jailed for perjury. So there is no case against him. He's innocent. And he's another American at the wrong place in the wrong time. And, arguably Trevor Reed was the same way. I mean, some rank-and-file Russian police officer deciding to make themselves famous by arresting an American. So, quite frankly, I think Travis meets the criteria for wrongfully detained, and that's a discussion we'll have with the government in the coming days.
Okay. Good luck with all of that. Jonathan Franks, thanks for joining us.